with the waters, from which carbonic acid develops. Thus, a gigantic deposit of carbonic acid grew on the bottom of the lake for years. Then, when this had reached the critical mass, respectively size, there was a chain reaction, whereby the deposit, during an explosion, shot through the water of the lake as a huge bubble of carbon dioxide and shot high into the atmosphere. In the fateful night of the 21st of August, 1986, approximately 1.7 million cubic meters of poisonous carbon dioxide gas escaped from the subsoil of Lake Nyos, and as a deadly cloud, it set itself like a carpet above the earth, within a radius of about 25 kilometers, and all life suffocated. But with this, the danger for the future wasn't banished, because by the turn of the millennium, an enormous deposit of carbon dioxide will once again accumulate under the lake, which will then be twice as large as the one in the explosion within the last year. If it comes to a new outbreak of poisonous gas in the new millennium, then the consequences will be even more devastating than they were a little more than half a year ago. From our side, however, we will send some more impulses in order to influence the earthly scientists to find possible means and ways, on a technical basis, to diffuse the poisonous waters at the bottom of Lake Nyos, namely in the form that these poisonous waters are transported above the surface of the lake in a controlled and harmless manner and are made safe. Billy says, and how does this agree with your directive, which says that you may in no way interfere in the affairs of other peoples and civilizations? Quetzal says this can be reconciled because we interfere in no affairs at all. Rather, we only send out impulses to certain scientists, who can encounter solutions with these and work on them without them even having the slightest notion of the fact that they have received impulses from us. So they will be of the opinion that the impulses come from themselves, and they will ascribe all insights and successes to themselves. It must be said in this connection that we offer no solutions through these impulses, rather, we only transmit impulses, through which suggestions for ideas result in certain directions and so on. Billy says you promote my understanding. But since we're already talking about volcanism, how is it, actually, in Italy with Mount Vesuvius? To my knowledge, this is still active, and if it comes to an eruption, it will presumably come to a worse disaster than what was the case on the 24th of August, AD 79, when Pompeii was completely destroyed by the enormous eruption of Vesuvius and was buried. The hot, liquid magma under the soil of Vesuvius is hundreds of square kilometers in size and even extends beneath the city of Rome, as I know from you. Quetzal says that is correct. Under the volcano, at a depth of approximately 8 kilometers, there is a huge lake of magma, which has a total area of 523 square kilometers, and from this, several vents flow out of the flanks and out of the crater of the mountain, and occasional masses of magma rise just beneath the crater's surface. And if it comes to an eruption of Vesuvius, and I mean a really tremendous eruption, there will be a catastrophe of enormous proportions. Billy says then a question through the fault of the person, the Aral Sea is drying up, as well as the Dead Sea. Will this actually continue in such a way, and will one have to expect that the irrationality of the person will actually lead to the disappearance of these two bodies of water on the map? Quetzal says unfortunately, this must be expected. If everything continues in such a way with the abuse of the water, like through the emptying of it and through the inhibition of new inflows, then probably in no more than 100 years, neither the Aral Sea nor the Dead Sea will exist. Billy says recently, I was asked for the reason why the so-called Franklin expedition had failed and why all the participants had died. It was a pole expedition. Quetzal says that is well known to me. Without exception, the participants of the expedition died as a result of lead poisoning, which was brought about by canned food, for the cans contained high concentrations of lead that poisoned the contents, which were then eaten by the people, by what means they fatally poisoned themselves. And those, who did not die directly from lead poisoning, miserably perished by freezing to death. Billy says aha. Then to another matter, the alleged moon landing of the Americans. Why the alleged moon landing participants maintain, in spite of the solid evidence to the contrary, that they had actually been on the moon. One could make these ones talk by truth serums, nevertheless, and could uncover the moon landing lie that fools the world. Quetzal says that would hardly be possible because all the alleged participants were placed under heavy drugs and hypnosis without their knowledge, after which they were then subjected to a post-hypnotic brainwashing, and in consequence of this, all artificial memories of non-realized experiences and adventures and, thus, of the faked moon landing were dictated to them, which they then adopted into their waking consciousness, whereby they became of the belief of their alleged experiences and adventures. The drug-induced and hypnotic blockade, through which nothing should be betrayed, is so strong that it can be penetrated by no means, and such attempts could sooner have a deadly consequence than that the truth could be squeezed out. Billy says, oh, so I see. You once said that the Incas sacrificed children, in order to appease the cult gods. Where, then, were these children sacrificed? Quetzal says at various places, but often on a high mountain in Tiwatana. Billy says in Egypt, falcons were regarded as sacred birds and were also given as mummifications to the deceased, as additions to the graves. Where did the Egyptians get so many falcons? Did they breed or import these specifically for this purpose? Quetzal says neither, for actually, falcons were only rarely killed, mummified, and given to the deceased as additions to the graves. In truth, there prevailed in ancient Egypt an active falcon mummifying swindle, which rested on the fact that mummified forms of falcons were produced in great quantities, but these contained no falcon bones but rather animal bones, such as cow bones, etc. Many thousands of such false mummifications of falcons were produced, which were then sold at prices that were high at the time. Often involved in this commercial swindle and commercial fraud were the priests, who obtained great wealth through this. Billy says then a question in reference to mercury. Here, it is used in ointment medicine. What other purpose does it have? Quetzal says mercury is highly antibacterial. Billy says then I would like to know what will be developed by the terrestrial astronomers and scientists, etc. as a further consequence of the Hubble telescope, this in reference to further surpassing this coming telescope, which should be positioned in Earth's orbit, namely around the year 1990, as you once said? Quetzal says first, a similar but better telescope will be built, which will be stationed on the Earth. In the new millennium, however, plans and developments will continue on, and then, the so-called interferometer will be developed. Billy says what must one understand by that? Quetzal says it will be a telescope that will consist of a whole series of other telescopes that are grouped together, which will reveal undreamed of and unexpected new impressions and insights about the universe to astronomical science. Billy says I can't imagine that, when I think of how narrow-minded these scientists are in part. Quetzal says with that, you are right, unfortunately. Billy says Semyaza once talked about Earth's oil reserves, just about those which were known at that time and which should last from then until another 25 years or so. But in the meantime, several other stocks of oil have been found, and this still continues to occur. How will this look, however, in the new millennium? Quetzal says that terrestrial oil reserves, which will become known by the turn of the millennium, should be sufficient in relation to the increasing world population and its consumption of Earth's oil, from the time mentioned until about another 70 years. But at the same time, it should be noted that this will concern only the quantities of Earth's oil reserves that are known up to then. Actually, a portion of the petroleum extracted from the Earth is constantly renewed by natural, internal processes of the Earth, as well as by natural plant deposits, animal deposits, and human deposits, due to the processes of decay and transformation, with their death and decay. Billy says that is to be well understood. But how will the further situation of the world develop, with regard to the economy and unemployment. You previously talked about unemployment and the economic